Indistinguishable, a short story by Christopher Wynne. The men huddled wordlessly around a flame which guttered in the breeze, seeing its reflected spark in the corners of one another's eyes, and how it turned their irises translucent yellow like a jaundiced moon. A rusty can of beans and a single communal spoon passed hands, each spoonful judiciously measured for the sake of fairness. Once emptied, it was not discarded, but propped upright by several stones so as to catch the rain that would surely come. The exhaustion of one had forced all to make camp in the open. Thus they kept the fire small and sat shoulder to shoulder so as to block its light from any unlikely observers. As predicted, it was soon extinguished by thick droplets that slapped audibly against the clay. All except one closed their eyes and bowed their heads as though in prayer, lulled by weariness into an uneasy sleep under the freakishly expansive sky. The guard towed the smoking embers out of boredom. They hissed pleasantly, grayish vapors wafting upwards uncertainly, like a drunken ghost. They rose with the sun, shaking dust from their denim and leather garb. One checked the chamber of a rifle and slung it over his shoulder. Another sheathed a knife and hefted an axe. Still another rested a blood-stained baseball bat against the back of his neck like a yoke. They nodded and split into groups of two, all holding a straggling line and keeping within earshot of the others. The dilapidated remains of a highway in the distance kept their course true. Occasionally one would stop with a pair of binoculars and glass the signs that stood along it, indicating with his fingers how many dozens of miles were still to go. Every couple of hours they would whistle and converge under shade, passing around canteens and reporting any unusual sight. One of them had found a dog, a lab by the looks of him, who had been seated obstinately beside the day's dead remains of his owner. At first he had growled, but a bit of jerky had proved irresistible. Now he followed at the heels of a new master, unsure of the rest of this two-legged pack, until they also had shared a few scraps, and empathetically patted his jutting ribs. The man who had found him kissed his velvet ears. Their water had run out when the man with the binoculars raised a solitary finger. One of them climbed a tree to verify, his tired grin signaling a city in sight. Another fainted just a few hundred yards from the first building and was nonchalantly hefted over the shoulders of the largest man. They smashed the plexiglass entrance of a gas station and revived the fainted man with a lukewarm soda. All judiciously scrounged for bags of chips, almonds, even the occasional rarity of an oatmeal cookie. These things and more they pocketed before moving on. They paused before a multi-storied building a few blocks from their destination. Some wanted to continue, but the eldest vetoed this simply by gesturing at the lowering sun. They shrugged and followed him in, spreading out so that every entrance was covered below and every vantage point was exploited above. Ragged decks of cards were brought forth, and food was gambled until the losers were left with naught, at which point some of the spoils were returned to them. Once this grew tiresome, those on the ground floor lent their ear to a man with a pleasant voice, as he read aloud from books he had found along the way. When the light grew too dim, he dog-eared a page, and all retired. At dawn, the men gathered on the rooftop. The man with binoculars examined the nearby gun store, paying particular attention to the truck that blocked its entrance. They determined that it would have to be moved, for entering through the back would mean going one by one down a tight alleyway. Taking consideration for whom had done their share of dangerous tasks, 2 newcomers were chosen to move the truck. They were preceded by the man with the rifle, moving only once he was in position directly across from the store. The pair slunk down the sidewalk, hugging the walls. Once horizontal to the store, they took to their bellies, crawling with knees and elbows until they reached the driver's side of the truck. The first man quietly cursed the locked door and peeked over to verify that the emergency brake was engaged. The men collectively cringed as a gunshot rang out from within the store, prostrating the first man and blinding the second with bone fragments from his partner's skull. The man with the rifle fired twice, first at where the muzzle flash had emanated and second at the blinded man who writhed on the asphalt. All was quiet. Then an infant began to cry. The man with the rifle magnified on the store, espying what he took for a spatter of blood behind where he'd placed his first shot. He raised a thumb at the hotel rooftop. This time they opted for the alleyway, hacking the back door down with an axe and sending the dog in first. His paws faintly patted within, and they heard him whine in unison with the baby for a moment before reappearing and wagging his tail. The man with the rifle went next, whistling once he was sure. All crowded in, staring dumbfounded at the sight. The baby screamed ravenously from the floor, its mother unconscious a few paces hence, grazed on the side of her head. The man with the rifle retrieved her still-warm shotgun and gave it to the man with the dog. The eldest took several backpacks from the wall and busied himself by filling them with the discarded items strewn about the store, assorted boxes of ammunition, handguns, a cleaning kit. Some, but not all, leered icily at the woman, gradually congregating around her. The man with the rifle stepped gingerly aside and began to help the eldest. The man with the dog strode forward and seized the youngest man by the shoulder, steering him towards the exit. The youth stopped his leering and followed, seeming somewhat relieved. The eldest, the man with the rifle, and several others were not far behind, hauling a bag apiece. These men sat on the curb at the far end of the alleyway and took stock of the goods. They paused for a moment when the infant's cry ceased, the dog looking back and furrowing its brow. The youth hugged him tightly to his chest. The others came out with the key to the truck some minutes later, eyes downcast. The weapons were loaded and distributed according to seniority and competence, then all piled into the cab and the bed. They rejoiced at its 3/4 of a tank. When it ran out at last, they found themselves surrounded, having attracted too much attention. All died, even the dog, though his master shoved him away and told him to run. And when their weapons, clothes, and food had changed hands, the killers were indistinguishable from those they had killed.